We want to get right to the race for the White House. Now that the Democratic convention has wrapped up, it's the Republicans' turn. President Trump, Vice President Pence will accept their nominations for re-election next week. And early this morning, I spoke with the Vice President about Joe Biden's big night. Mr. Vice President, thank you for joining us this morning. Joe Biden put the COVID crisis at the center of his speech last night. He promised getting control of the virus would be his top priority and said that President Trump, quote, failed in his most basic duty to the nation. He's failed to protect us when the virus hit. Your response?
Well, I couldn't be more proud of the leadership President Trump has provided from the early days of the coronavirus pandemic. Remember, when President Trump took the unprecedented step of suspending all travel from China before we had a single person-to-person transmission of the coronavirus in this country, Joe Biden condemned it. He called it xenophobic and literally for months and months was critical of the president's response. And frankly, if we'd done what Joe Biden wanted to do, the losses would have been much, much more. He's actually said he supported that move. The president said many times this would never get... Well, he said he supported it months and months later, George. It was literally after probably everybody in the country recognized the difference that President Trump's leadership made. But, you know, it's remarkable when you looked at that speech last night, literally everything that Joe Biden said that we should be doing on the coronavirus, President Trump has been doing from very early on. In early February, we started a march toward a vaccine in record time. And while Joe Biden said last night that there'll be no miracle cure, we actually believe that it's very likely before the end of this year that we will have one or more vaccines for the American people. And in fact, we're producing tens of millions of those vaccines right now. As soon as the FDA determines one is safe and effective, we're going to have literally millions of doses for the American people. One of the things the Vice President said last night, he wants mask mandates all over the country. The President has not supported that, but the President also said many times it would never get this bad. And back in April, you said we will, quote, largely have this coronavirus epidemic behind us by Memorial Day. More than 75,000 Americans have died since then. At a minimum, haven't you and the President underestimated the severity of this crisis? And is there anything more you could have done? Well, I think it's important for all of us to recognize, as I think most Americans do, that we've all been learning all along the way. You know, on your network in late February and early March, there was a minimizing of the threat of the coronavirus. We were listening to our scientists along the way. And frankly, by Memorial Day, the massive increases in cases and losses in places like New York and New Jersey and Connecticut and elsewhere were largely behind us. And many of our best experts thought we might be going into a summer respite, like a seasonal flu, which abates in the summertime. We called on American industry to produce supplies and ventilators, to develop a vaccine, to reinvent testing, where today we've done more than 70 million tests in this country. I truly do believe that the way you're seeing cases declining now, the way that we believe we'll continue to see losses decline in the days ahead, it's a great tribute to the American people. It's a great tribute to our healthcare workers. But we're going to stay focused on dealing with the coronavirus pandemic. But in the days between now and Election Day, we'll take the case of the American response to this pandemic to the American people. If that's all true, why is the sustained death rate in the United States so much higher than other developing countries, especially the European countries? As Joe Biden has pointed out in his speech, we have 5% of the world's population and about 25% of the world's deaths. Well, George, look, the reality is that our mortality rate now with more than 5.5 million cases identified is among the lowest in the world. And we're going to continue to work every day to provide the kind of medicines and treatments that reduce that. I'm absolutely convinced in my heart of hearts that we would have lost hundreds of thousands of more Americans but for the strong leadership of President Donald Trump and the cooperation of the American people. President Trump said this week that the only way we're going to lose this election is if the election is rigged. Is that what you believe? Well, look, we're going to take a strong stand for ballot integrity. And when you see Democrat politicians and governors around the country advancing what's called universal mail-in balloting. We're going to fight efforts to compromise the integrity of this election with universal mail-in voting.
But even Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell said yesterday that voting by mail is a, quote, non-existent problem. So let me ask the question again. Do you agree with the president when he says the only way you're going to lose this election is if the election is rigged?
I don't think there's any question that if we have widespread voter fraud, which I think universal mail-in voting invites. I mean, I didn't see the majority leader's comment, but I want to agree that absentee balloting is not a problem in America today. But you look at Nevada, you look at other states around the country, George, they're literally wanting to mail ballots out to every household in the state without the kind of accountability that's existed in our time-honored absentee balloting system.
By definition, if Joe Biden wins, it's not a fair election?
Well, look, we're going to make sure it's a fair election. The American people are going to have a choice between a president who's rebuilt our military, revived our economy, appointed conservatives to our courts, and stood strong with the men and women of law enforcement versus Joe Biden, the Democratic Party, overtaken by the radical left that want higher taxes, socialized medicine, open borders, abortion on demand, and spoke not one word in their entire convention about the violence that's claiming lives in the streets of cities across this country. We're going to lay that choice out, and I know the American people are going to choose 4 more years of President Donald Trump in the White House.
We will be watching that convention next week. Mr. Vice President, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, George.
Primetime coverage here all next week.
Well, hey there, GMA fans. Robin Roberts here. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Lots of great stuff here. So go on, click the subscribe button right over here to get more of awesome videos and content from GMA every day, anytime. We thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the morning on GMA.